Hi, I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge. Welcome to another edition of Half Hour on the Hill. And I'm incredibly excited and honored to have as my guest Tina Grosowsky, who is on the leadership team for Elders Climate Action, the Massachusetts chapter. So Tina, thank you so much for coming on the show. Always great to see you.
Thanks. Great to be here. Always good to talk with you.
And we do talk a lot. I would say of my 185,000 constituents, you're probably among the top 10 that I talk to as far as constituents, both in advocating on legislation and just catching up on things going on in the district. So I really do appreciate your advocacy and persistence. It really has made a difference.
Well, it breaks wonderful to my heart to hear you say that, because that's really meaningful for me in how
Thank you.
The work that we all do and is so important to us.
And it is tough work to be an advocate. Tough in some ways to be a legislator. We met each other when you were an Acton resident here with your family in Acton, when you were one of the leads in the state on tobacco-free Mass, right?
Right, and maybe even before that, Jamie, because when you were a state rep, we tried to get, and we were successful at getting the local regulations passed in Acton for a smoke-free restaurant.
That's right.
And the smoke-free workplace law. And we had a coalition of citizens from the town, Lee Kettleson, who's been very active in climate as well. And you met with us, I remember specifically, in the Acton Library conference room to talk about how we could get a citizens petition through the Acton Town Meeting, which we did successfully.
That's right. And was Acton one of the lead communities in the state?
Yep. That was in '97, I believe.
And it's hard to believe, but I think those who might be a little younger, hard to believe that, pre the statewide ban, smoking was allowed in restaurants and public places and even at the State House.
Even at the State House, that's right. In hospitals and doctors' offices, that's right. And Massachusetts was a leader, and the legislature at the time was slow to pick it up until they saw that over 50% of the towns were voting for or passed at town meeting to have the smoke-free workplace law in place. And then they took it up at the state level when Governor Romney was there and passed it, I think, in 2004. That's
right. And how did you get involved in that issue, that work?
Specifically here in Acton, there was a Friendly's restaurant that used to be at on 27 there at the. And my daughter was about 3 or 4, and we would go into Friendly's for ice cream, and the high school kids and adults would sit in the back of the restaurant smoking. And I remember how she used to look at the high school kids, and I said, "There's something wrong here, and this is not right." So I worked on it, got a coalition of people together, including medical personnel, American Cancer Society, et cetera, and put it together and made a coalition. So that's how I got involved to start with. Yeah, and then I started working, changed fields, started working, got hired, and eventually worked for the state. That's right.
And then did you begin to focus on climate upon your retirement, or how did you get involved in climate action and Elders Climate Action?
That's a great question. When I was at home during COVID and working at UMass Medical School, I saw that my passion for tobacco, we'd done so much work, was still there, but I wasn't as interested in it. And I thought because I was on a state pension, I could retire. There wasn't any need to work more for the state, and I could start working on the climate that I was so interested in. So through a friend that I know who was on Elders Climate Action leadership team and was involved from the very beginning, he asked me to join the leadership team because he knew that I had a lot of experience working in advocacy from all those years working on tobacco. And so I joined the leadership team.
That's great. And so Elders Climate Action has been in existence for a long time then?
About 5 or 6 years now.
Okay, so fairly new organization.
That's right. Yeah.
And yet I find that it's one of the most active groups, not only in my district, but across the state in advocating for policy. So it really has had a real impact.
That's good to hear. I think we're a group that's becoming known for our research, for our the skill level of the people who are on the leadership team and on the legislative team, because we are older people who have worked and retired and bring the skills, whether it's in law, in healthcare, in computer technology, in mechanical engineering, in communications, marketing. People have spent their careers working in these fields, and bring it to how to advocate for climate. And
there's so many skills, to your point, of people that are now leaders like yourself with Elders Climate Action. What is the sort of makeup of the organization? How does it advocate? Are there lobby days? How does it work? I mean, I sort of know this, but if you could describe in more detail.
Yeah, so we're the Massachusetts chapter of the national organization. So we meet monthly as a chapter on Zoom, so that people from all across the state can tune in, and actually from other states can tune in. We have speakers once a month, like legislators such as yourself, that are working on the advocacy at the legislative level, or people from the administration, from environment and energy and affairs, to experts from MIT, from Harvard, and so that our membership can become educated on the issue of climate and what needs to be done. And then the organization runs, because we have a leadership team, again, that has expertise across the spectrum. We meet weekly so that we're on top of what's going on legislatively throughout the session, the 2-year session. We have a research team that does the research, that puts on either sponsors the speakers, or we have once a month also an educational forum called Deep Dialogue, where we can get more into the weeds, as you would say, about an issue and educate our membership about it. And so we have a communications team, a leadership team, a research team, a educational team, and a membership team.
Wow.
So all of that puts together all the work that we do, and we're all volunteers. So as opposed to an organization which is terrific, like Mothers Out Front, which you know and work with well, or 350 Mass, these are our allies in the climate world, they all have paid staff. So the fact that you think so well of us is such a wonderful inspiration, because, again, we don't have any paid staff. We do all the work.
That is impressive.
Yeah.
And your generation, if I may say it that way, really is leading on climate in so many ways. And I think of Bill McKibben and his work at the national level and his organization.
Right.
What drew you to climate action? Why there's so many things you could use your skills to focus on. Why climate?
Well, again, I have a daughter who I fought for with the tobacco, prevention work, and I, gotten older, and will be leaving this world at some point, and leaving it to her and her generation, and then for a lot of other elders who actually have grandchildren, that's their motivation to be working on Elders Climate Action. That the science is telling us so truthfully how little time we have left to work on this issue. And as you know, the state has set their climate goal. This climate goal is to work on this issue with goals for 2025. That's next year. For 6 years from now, for 2030, and 2040 and 2050. So, I can definitely be working on it for the next, hopefully the next 10 years. So this is where my passion lies, and how I decide how I'm going to spend my time, and how I'm going to take care of myself so I can spend my time doing this kind of work.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that, because that sort of generational responsibility, making sure that your daughter and her kids have a world we can live in. Does Elders Climate Action have interaction with other elders, if you will, to get them engaged in the movement?
Sure. I mean, initially when we first started, we did a lot of work with educational seminars at senior centers, or other types of organizations, gardening clubs, or other organizations, and places where people who are older spend their time. We've since kind of spread out from that. We partner a lot with Bill McKibben's Third Act that he's just started, and his organization 350, which is not generationally associated with elders, but a lot of elders are participating again with 350 because they bring their skills to it. And more, I think people are seeing that no matter how or what age they are, like yourself, you might have nieces or nephews, and they are caring about the world that those young people are going to grow up into. The high school students that are interns here, you know, they're going to be into that next world. The young people who are in the jobs now, you know, 5 years ago there weren't that many jobs, and now young people who are graduated from college or who have gotten PhDs in you know, engineering and sustainability and environmental affairs are doing the work now that needs to get done to put the infrastructure in place so that we can meet those goals for 2025. Hopefully, we probably won't, but 2030 and 2040, 2050.
Sure.
So that long beyond when I'm here and, you know, people in their 50s and 60s, by the time the young people get to be 24 in 2040 and 2050, when they're in their 40s and 50s, hopefully the planet will have cooled down, global warming will have reached its peak, and there'll be all sorts of new infrastructure in place that we've just started to put into place to meet the climate emergency.
And things are moving very fast, and I'm proud that the past 3 sessions, including this one, the legislature, you know, has been on track to pass a comprehensive climate bill. This session, is there a particular bill or area of climate action that Elders Climate Action has been focused on?
Well, of course, as you know, the climate bill that just got passed through the Senate, thanks to your work especially, and other senators who really led the charge, Senator Barrett, Senator Cream, and the most important provisions in that bill, of course, are the ones that help start the transition off of gas, which can't happen soon enough, and the issue of where we're going to put the infrastructure for getting off gas, so siting for these new infrastructures, and the permitting, which it needs to get reformed, and at least the beginning of that reform was in that bill, which is really so important.
Absolutely, and I want to talk about that in a moment. We're going to take a brief break, and we'll be back for the second half of Half Hour on the Hill. Thank you.
Looking to help in the fight against climate change? Citizens Climate Lobby is a grassroots organization focusing on national policies to address the global climate crisis. Our volunteers promote climate solutions within their communities by discussing with officials how national action can ensure a healthy future while creating economic opportunities. We advocate for a healthy climate future based on shared values, not political differences, always beginning with respect, gratitude, and appreciation. This approach prompts action from officials resistant to climate solutions, guiding leaders toward a healthier, livable world. Join us today for a brighter tomorrow.
Hello, State Senator Jamie Eldridge, here for the second half of Half Hour on the Hill, having a great conversation with Tina Grosowsky on the leadership team of Elders Climate Action. And Tina, we were talking about and it's particularly timely, the Senate climate legislation, an act upgrading utilities and protecting ratepayers and removing from gas. You talked a little bit about the permitting and siting part of the bill, and of course the shift away from gas. And I know that's a complicated policy, but I know we have talked about the clean heat bill and sort of how does Massachusetts move away from its reliance on gas and fossil fuels in general. And if you could talk a little bit about Elders Climate Action, focus on that and how it relates to the bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of the matter. As you mentioned, Bill McKibben, he has been, you know, championing the move off fossil fuels in the United States for years now, because it's the burning of fossil fuels that causes the global warming. So here in Massachusetts, most of our heating and cooling is reliant on gas. We've moved off of oil for the most part, although there's still homes that use oil.
Yes.
And the next step is to get off of the supply of gas. And to do that, people have to electrify their home and retrofit their homes to use heat pumps. And so, the fossil fuel industry is a strong industry, and I'm familiar with that from the work in the tobacco industry that I did. And they're all investor owned. They make all their money from investments in oil and in gas. And so it's going to take a long time for them to find a economic model for them to get off of gas and still make the money that they need to make for their investors. So, switching to electricity, at least in Massachusetts, doesn't seem like it would be that hard because there's many of the same utilities that own the gas here in Massachusetts also own electric utilities. So
and we don't have the fossil fuels in underground. That's not part of our economy.
That's right. So, most of our gas comes from fracking from other states. And the workers that, put in the gas pipelines, that work on the gas, that is a really important piece too, because we want to make sure that not only are we doing a justice to the people who where we cite the gas and new permits for all electrical substations and infrastructure, we want to make sure that the workers that used to work on gas are going to be able to still have jobs putting in geothermal, for instance, where they had the gas pipeline. So if you know how to work on a gas pipeline, you know how to put in geothermal pipelines and you know how to work on them. So we wanted to make sure that part of the bill was really important.
Right, the just transition.
The just transition, right. Not only for communities that have environmental justice designations for people who are low income, people of color live. We want to get the infrastructure in place for them in a just way, but also for the workers who work on the pipelines. So while the Senate bill was a strong bill, and it starts to pave the roadway or the transition to get off gas, it's really going to be important in the next couple of years to get off gas altogether. We know we have a governor who's really a proponent of that in Massachusetts. So we're lucky here in Massachusetts. And we have the legislature that's beginning to understand the earnest of the timing of it and how important it is to move quickly. And the siting and permitting was really important because we have to get that done quickly, but we also need to get it done justly.
Absolutely, and the siting and permitting, and when I was driving here today, I saw some signs opposed to a battery storage facility in a neighborhood and saying, well, if we're really serious about, having schools, homes, buildings that are 100% electric, we need more battery storage, and yet, sometimes there's opposition to that, and that's a part of the permitting and siting piece is striking that balance between the public interest of the fact that we need more clean energy facilities, solar, geothermal, offshore wind, as well as battery storage.
Right, and we need to educate the public about what battery storage is and how safe it is, and that the fire codes and the fire expertise is there to meet people's fears about having them sited in their neighborhoods, and that battery storage is there's all sorts of sizes of battery storage, and that it's something that there's new technology coming every year, and up at Devon's that I know you know so well, there's companies that are working on cleaner and more efficient and more safe battery storage. So that's just one tech piece, that's really important in the whole infrastructure of how we're going to get off gas and how we're going to site the new clean energy infrastructure that we try to put into place. Massachusetts has also become a leader in wind energy here in Massachusetts.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And you
best
passed
in the country. Yeah, off the Cape and Islands. Yeah.
Right, and you passed some key bills about that, and we're going to need more and more of that. That's going slower than advocates have hoped because of the challenges of the pricing of the pieces of the turbines and getting the infrastructure of the grid. And that's the other really important piece that's got to get fixed, whether it's going to be through new legislation or for more regulation. Once we get all that clean energy sited and the transmission needs to come off of the wind, it's got to get directed to all the cities and towns, and we don't have an electric grid that's capable of handling all of that yet. So that's another big piece that, whether it's through the legislative process or through the administrative regulatory process, that we need to get in place in the next 5 years.
Absolutely.
Has to get done.
And I appreciate mentioning, the Governor Healy is a governor that is focused on, that transition in every possible way, that, she has appointed excellent people to DPU, to Mass DOER,
That's
to
right.
EA that are really committed to the same vision. So
That's right.
exciting to see. We've also talked, I know we've had a lot of conversations about, okay, what's actually happening on the street in our communities, including, in Hudson, including in Acton. And I know you've worked very hard in Hudson to try to move, town officials, developers to embrace, electrifying what they're hoping to develop. If you could talk a little bit about that work, 'cause it's so important for it to happen, not just at the state level, but the local level as well.
Right. Well, we're lucky that there are towns like Acton and Weston and Wellesley and Newton and that have the resources to move more quickly on this issue so that they can put resources toward hiring a sustainability director in their town or establish a clean energy or sustainability committee in their town so that they're paving the way to adopt local regulations either through the stretch code or maybe they're one of the leading towns in the state pilot program, the 10 towns that have adopted the no fossil fuel-free construction.
Acton.
Yeah. So those towns are leading the way, just like back in the 90s when the tobacco industry was, putting every blockade that they could to keep people addicted to tobacco. Today we have towns that are the leading edge towns that are putting this infrastructure in place at the local level, whether it's through town meeting, the select boards have passed something, planning boards have passed something, a local green group of some kind or sustainability group has led the way on a town meeting warrant article. These pieces at the local level are getting put into place so that towns that have less resources and less capacity to put these infrastructure into place, even as simple as hiring a sustainability director if they don't have town budget to do that. So that's really important, And we learn, the towns like Hudson learn from the towns like Acton, et cetera. And in Hudson, we've had sightings by developers that we've been trying to fight because they're still building homes to be heated with gas. There's great town-led citizens who are doing work on recycling, educating the community on recycling, educating the community by holding what we call climate cafes, where we educate residents on what is clean energy, how can you put a heat pump in your home, how do you electrify your transportation, which we didn't really talk about, but that was also in the Senate bill, the transportation electrification for the MBTA, I believe. It was also in the bill.
And state car fleets, exactly.
Yes. So that's really important so people can decide at what point in their life their furnace is not working anymore. They have to put in a new furnace in their home. That's the time where they can move off of gas furnace and go buy a heat pump. And there's people now who are installers. There's education by groups like Energize Mass who go out and educate coaches in the communities so that they can go out and talk to the residents and learn about how to make this transition economically feasible for them. And fortunately, we have a president for the next 16 months who's put in the United States incredible resources, financial resources and infrastructure to help people who have less resources in towns and states with less resources to put in tax rebates and money for school, clean energy
Incentives,
for
yep.
incentives for schools, for school buses, for low-income residences and homes, so that through the utilities, they can get rebates on the heat pumps. They can get tax incentives on the electric vehicles that they purchase, so that slowly, and that's the biggest issue, slowly these incentives and education at the local level, whether it's in Hudson or Marlboro, are getting put into place. You know, in my view, and for a lot of climate advocates, including Bill McKibben that you mentioned, the really big question for us in the next 16 months is the national election. And
Yes.
we have to get that right. We have to get a person in the White House who's going to continue to work on addressing climate, keep us in the international framework that the other countries are working on, and keep us going forward on working on climate. It's such important work that we have to do.
Absolutely, and I know you've been chipping away at this effort in Hudson. So you're meeting with developers, you're meeting with town officials to try to get them to adopt these policies. Is that where things are at now?
Right, and so we have a local group, Green Hudson, that has terrific leadership that was in place before I moved to Hudson from Acton. We have a team that meets and decides on what we're going to be working on, and right now we're working on a clean energy and climate plan for the town, which is what many towns have done. You know, we took it before the select board. They weren't ready for it. They said, you go work on it, and you know, and that's what we're doing. So we're getting community input on that, having the climate cafes, and working on getting, you know, the local, we have a municipal light plant in Hudson that in conjunction with the town of Stowe. They've been very on board with giving incentives at the local level since they're not part of the statewide Mass Save program.
Right.
And hopefully they express some interest in battery storage once the big Eversource project is finished, and also in providing some, probably some resources towards a sustainability director.
That is very encouraging.
Yeah.
That is great. Well, I so appreciate the state work as well as the work in Hudson, and again, just your persistence, and I think also very clearly, you know, advocating with me the things that you're looking for, and that's so difficult in advocacy because legislators are being given so much information. So thank you so much for your leadership and your work. I know it will continue, and our collaboration will only get stronger.
Yes.
Yeah, and thank you so much for those who tuned in for a Half Hour on the Hill. I'm State Senator Jamie Eldridge, and look forward to talking to you more in the community and keeping updated on my regular cable TV show. Thank you.